Hey guys, welcome to another weekly focus. Hope you had a great week, and there's been some activity in the market, especially with gold. So the movement on gold this week was really impressive, but we'll look at gold in a bit. So for the trade recap thing, so let's see. For the trade recap, it's still the same. So I think like this week I didn't have anything I was looking at. So you look at gold, no position, US30, nothing, NAS, nothing, the S&P500 nothing as well. So price did move, but it didn't align, let's say, with the setup thing I was looking at. So I didn't take any positions. So let's look at the DXY and just see what we have for this week, and I'll try to go really quick this time. So here's the DXY on the monthly time frame. So what am I looking on the monthly time frame? So again, it's just very basic questions. Where is price at, and where is price most likely going to gravitate to? So looking at it on the monthly time frame, what is the structure thing we're looking at, and what is the overall trend we're looking at? So if you look at this from the monthly time frame, you can tell the DXY has been in this bullish run. So you get the impulse, you get a correction, you get an impulse, and you see a correction coming in. So there's something I mentioned, I think, the other time. It's about the pivot point. So if you look in a situation like this is not a pivot point. Here is a pivot point, because then we had a break of this area. So this is not a pivot point. So everything that's happening right here wasn't the pivot point thing. So you're looking at an area like this, and you're expecting prices to pull back to an area like this. And if the buyers are still interested in a pair like this, then you should see prices moving to the upside, taking out this highs. So when you look at the DXY on the daily time frame, there's still a possibility for prices to move to, on the monthly time frame, there's still a possibility for prices to move to the upside. Now the monthly time frame is pretty massive. It's going to take time for this to play out. So having the overall picture thing, like the big picture in mind, is very important, because when you look at price from a bigger picture, it just makes it like completely easy for you. So now looking at this, if price breaks out of this area, then we could start looking at the DXY selling impulsively, or we see sellers coming in. So currently, I would say looking at the DXY on the monthly time frame, my bias is we're still in this uptrend, we're still moving to the upside. So price is going to pull back temporarily just to get the pivot point, just to get the area of interest and stuff like that. So the psychological level thing I'm looking at is still 100,000. So we had this area right here of 100,000. So I'm still looking at this psychological level. I'm still looking at the psychological level of 100,000, and if price rejects at this point, then I'm expecting prices to move all the way to 110. So those are the areas I'm looking at on the DXY. Now this again, it's on the monthly time frame. It makes it really difficult for you to look at the prices, let's say within the day or within the week from a time frame like this. So you can step down, let's say, to the weekly time frame, and let's see if anything makes sense on this time frame. So same thing, you're looking at this move right here. Here's your impulse, and as price comes back, you're looking at the pullback thing. So you look at this area right here, price has been rejecting around an area like this, which is completely fine. Now you look at this area, and you're looking at this psychological level here, psychological level of 100,000. If price keeps rejecting at this area, then you might see an impulsive move to an area like this, testing this trend line, and you see buyers coming in again. So we'll take prices to the upside, taking out these highs. The first area, or the first point of interest for me, has to be this psychological level of 110. You have these highs, and you have these highs over here. So those are the levels I'm looking at on the DXY. So we'll look at this on the daily time frame just to see. So as price starts moving to the downside, I'm still expecting this area to get taken out. So let's take this out. So as price starts moving to the downside, I have a trend line right here. So I'm watching this trend line just to see how price moves to the downside. So eventually, if this has to continue its movement to the downside, you'll see price pulling back to an area like this, and you see price moving to the downside, which is something that happened already. Movement, impulse, pullback, impulse, pullback, impulse. You're waiting for the pullback, and you're waiting for the impulse again to the downside. So just looking at this, if I had to if I had to pay attention to any structure on the DXY, let's say for next week, this is a structure I'm looking at right here. So here's the structure I'm looking at on the DXY. So there is a high possibility the DXY might move to the upside, and this is very important because when I look at the other pairs, US30, NAS100, S&P, and gold, there's a high possibility those pairs might start moving to the downside, and I'll show you those pairs in a bit. So just looking at this from the DXY on the daily time frame, market structure again, how is price moving, where is price most likely going to gravitate to. So you're looking at this. If you had to anticipate where price is most likely going to gravitate to, you're looking at this movement right here. You're looking at the pullback. Same thing. You had a pullback, you had a pullback, you had a pullback. So that's the same thing I'm looking at on the DXY, let's say from the daily time frame thing. So it makes it completely easy. So you get an impulse, you get a pullback, you get an impulse, you're waiting for the pullback. So the daily time frame on the DXY is what I'm going to pay attention to and see how these prices react from an area like this. And if we go above 100,000, because currently we're sat below the psychological level of 100,000, if price comes back up, you might see a test and you see price moving to an area like this. So that's what I'm expecting on the DXY on the daily time frame. So my bias on the DXY is to see a reversal thing, to the upside, testing this trend line on the daily time frame. So I'm just going to keep this right here, and I'll show you how important this is once you look at other pairs. So let's look at the first pair, and that has to be US30. Alright guys, so here's US30, and this is on the hourly time frame, and I'll come back to the hourly time frame, but let's put this on the daily time frame. So I'll show you something, and there's a similarity with this movement on US30 with NAS100 and the S&P 500. There's a similarity with all these pairs. So let's look at this. What's the big picture thing on US30? And we're looking at this from there's the daily time frame. You can look on the weekly time frame even. I'll use the daily because it's better. So we're looking at this on the daily time frame. What's the big picture thing on the daily time frame? We're looking at two psychological levels. The first one, 50,000, and the next one is 40,000. So we had an impulsive movement thing, and we had a crash that came in. So once you have an impulse, you're waiting for the correction, and you're waiting for price to move again to the upside, taking out these highs, which is really easy. So you look at the same thing. You're looking at the impulse, you get a crash. So if price has to move to the upside, the point of interest for me, like the area I'll be paying attention to, you have these highs right here, for price to take out these highs, so we can see prices moving again to the upside and probably testing 50,000. So that's a possibility you have right there on US30, looking at it from a bigger picture thing. So when you look at the psychological levels, so what is happening with the psychological levels? So the first one, we had 50,000. We haven't even gotten to 50,000 yet. We had a crash that came in. You had a crash that came in. Price traded below 40,000, and right now price is currently sat above 40,000. So what this tells me is there's a possibility we'll see price hovering around an area like this, and we see buyers coming in the market. Now the overall picture thing again makes it completely easy. Now this is something I've been doing for a very long time. So I'm looking at my impulse, I look at a correction. Once a correction comes, I'm looking at this entire impulse, and I'm waiting for prices to move again to the upside to take out this area. And what I like paying attention to around an area like this is a pivot point. So looking at this pair right now is really difficult to tell because the pivot point I don't think has been set already. So yes, there's a possibility you see an initial attempt from the buyers, and then most likely you see sellers coming in again, then you see the continuation move to the upside. So once you have this in mind and you kind of know what this pair is most likely going to do, you're looking at this area right here, psychological level, inability for price to trade below and stay below this area. Price comes back up, so you might see a test around here. You see buyers coming in. So here's a take for me. Looking at it on the daily time frame, the overall picture thing, you have an impulse, you have a correction, you're waiting for price to go up, you're waiting for this area to get taken out. Now if you step down to a lower time frame, and I'm just going to go, let's say, to the hourly real quick, because I want to show you guys what I'll be looking at for this week. And I don't do lots of channels. So there's a channel thing for me right here. So in a situation like this, and looking at what's happening on the DXY, so I'll bring this again to the DXY on the daily time frame. I'm expecting prices to move to the upside on the DXY. Then you probably see sellers coming in again to take prices to the downside, or you get a break, you get a correction, and you see prices moving to the upside. So that's what I'm looking on the DXY. So how is this going to help me when you come down to a pair like US30? So on the hourly time frame, and this is a structure, like this is a move that is common to almost all the indices I'm looking at. On this time frame, what you're looking at right here, you just get an impulse, you get a correction, you get an impulse, and you're waiting for the correction thing to come to an area like this. So this then gives you a channel, and I haven't done like channels on I haven't traded channels like this on this platform. Like I haven't shown you guys how I look at channels. So once you have a channel that forms like this, so you're doing the same thing. You're looking at these areas right here, the pivot point that gets set. This is not a pivot point, that's a pivot point right here. So once you get a pivot point that gets set, you're looking for prices to come back to an area like this, same thing, and you're looking for buys off of an area like this. So looking at the DXY again, now this is very important. I'll take this out. Looking at the DXY again, I'm expecting these prices to move to the upside, and because of this possible movement to the upside, you might look at a pair like US30 and you're looking for potential. So you're still looking for potential buys to the upside because of what's happening on the daily time frame, but I'm just showing you guys what I'm looking on the lower time frame. So if prices can then come back to an area like this, I'll be looking for buys to the upside. So that's the analysis thing I was trying to show you guys on US30. So this is something I'm looking at currently, and just to see what price is going to do. Now there's a possibility you might see US30 just moving again to the upside. So if the DXY keeps selling, or if there's just a minor sell on the DXY, and it doesn't take a lot on the DXY, like the movement on the DXY is not supposed to be equivalent to what's happening on these indices. You might just get a minor push on the DXY to the downside, and you see this guy moving to the upside like crazily. So that's a possibility thing right there on US30. So I'm waiting for this pullback thing to come. So let's see how price comes back. If it comes in a corrective manner, you wait for this to come in a corrective manner, and as price turns and it starts moving to the upside, then I'll look for the buys to the upside. So this is something I'll most likely trade next week. So just looking at this piece right here, so again, you had the pivot point that got set right here. That's your pivot point, and we're looking for this. We're expecting the same thing around an area like this. So if I get a push to the downside, see price coming to the downside, inability for prices to move past an area like this. So let's do this. So an inability for prices to go through this area, then I'm looking for buys again to the upside. So that's my analysis right there on US30, and it's very similar to what's happening on other pairs. So here's US30, and let's look at the next pair. Alright guys, so here's NAS100 on the hourly time frame as well. Same thing. Let's look at the daily time frame, and I'll show you guys what I'm looking at. And it's a similar move of what's happening on US30. So you're looking at this again, impulse, you're looking at a correction. After the correction, what happens? You're expecting these highs to get taken out, and you're expecting prices to move to the upside. So if I put this, and let's see, so I have 10, 15, so let's do another psychological level thing above that one. So do this. Yeah, let's do another psychological level. So I'll do 25,000 right here. 25,000. All right guys, cool. So here is it. So NAS100, so the psychological level we're currently set on or below. So we're looking at this right here, 20,000, and we had 15,000. Now if this pair had to keep dropping to the downside, the area I'll have been looking at, it's let's say 15,000. So if this keeps moving to the downside like this, impulse correction, so you get an impulse, you get a correction, you get an impulse, you get a correction, an inability for prices to go to the upside, you're expecting a crash again to the downside. So that's what I'm looking at right there. That's what I'm looking at right there. So if this has to keep moving to the downside, 15,000, the psychological level, it's an area I'm going to pay attention to. Now this is very important. This makes it again very interesting. When you look at the overall movement thing, you're looking at an impulse, you're looking at a correction. After the correction, you're waiting for prices to take out these highs, and you're expecting prices to move again to the upside. So the bigger picture thing for NAS100 is to see prices taking out these highs and making its way to like 25,000. Now this is going to take time because this is a massive move, and you can look at this on the weekly and the monthly time frame to get an understanding. But you can scale down, and again, the reason I'm scaling down, let's say, to the hourly time frame is because of what's happening on the DXY, and I'm seeing this possibility for prices to move to the upside, or let's say above 100,000. Something like this. I'm seeing this possibility before the sells or the break, pull back, and the movement to the upside. So because of this possibility, now I can step down, let's say, to the hourly and just look at the structure thing I can work with. So you step down to the hourly time frame again. This gives you a channel, and I don't do channels a lot, but I'll show you what I'm looking at on the channel thing right here. So you get the same thing. You get an impulse, you get a correction. Now the only difference with channels and the other structures I showed you, so with this you get an impulse, you get a correction, and you get price moving to the upside. Now with channels is a little bit different once I look at channels, because you get an impulse and you get pullbacks that come in really deep. Then you get an impulse, you get pullbacks that come in really deep, so giving you a channel thing that you can trade this way. So look at this one right here. You have an impulse thing, you get a correction. This was not a pivot point got set around here, so you're looking at this piece right here. Now price gives you another impulsive move. So what you're looking at on this pair on NAS100 is for a pullback thing to come in again, similar one, pullback, and you wait for the pivot point. Once you see the pivot point set, you look for the setup thing, you look for those confirmations, and then you take prices again to the upside. So this is going to keep playing like this till the area where price finds it difficult to move to the upside, then you get a crash. So this is what I'm looking at on NAS100, and it's very similar with what I was looking at on US30. So let's do this, take this out, look at US30, same thing, impulse, correction, impulse, you're waiting for the correction, price to move to the upside. On NAS100 again, impulse, correction, impulse, you're waiting for the correction for prices to move to the upside. So with this piece right here, I'll do the same thing. So I'm expecting prices to come back, and we'll take prices to the upside. In a situation like this, I'll probably pay attention to this psychological level of 20,000 right here. So we'll be looking for buys to the upside. So if I had to put, let's say, an anticipated move on this pair, we're looking at something like this. So let's see, you get price coming back down. You might get a 1:4 from a trade like this. So yep, so let's do something like this, 1:4, 1:5, something like this. So this is anticipated move I'm looking at on NAS100. You do the same thing on US30. The anticipated move I'm looking at is a buy to the upside as well. That's it right there. So let's see. And again, with this, you have to wait for the confirmation thing. You can't just trade it. So, but I'm just showing you guys what I'm looking at and what I'll be paying attention to. And if I see the move coming in, you see price selling, it slows down inability, wait for the confirmation, get those entries, and you move into the upside. So it's the same thing with NAS100, and it makes it really easy. So it's not very complex, and it's something I've been looking at as well. And I always trade channels, but I haven't traded channels like this in a long time. So when it forms and I see it and it aligns with the overall picture thing for me, then I can trade it. So that's an example right there, and that's it for NAS100. So you have the overall picture thing, and then you can scale down to lower time frames now on the hourly time frame, just to get something you can trade within the week. while looking at the bigger picture, because again, price might move to the upside, but then it gives you a deeper pullback, because the pullback or the correction sometimes get really complex. It's not just going to turn and start moving to the upside. It'll give you an initial move to the upside, giving you more pullbacks, and then it just makes it really complex. So you need to pay attention to what you're looking at. So this right here, I'm going to keep this on the charts, and we'll look at this next week and see how this played out. All right, cool. So that's it for NAS100. Let's look at the next pair. That has to be the S&P 500. All right, guys. So here's the S&P 500 on the hourly time frame, and I said this before. The S&P 500, NAS100, and US30, it has a similar movement thing on all these pairs. But let's look at this on the daily time frame, just so you have an understanding as to why I'm even looking at that minor structure thing right there. So look at this piece right here. Very interesting piece of price action. You look at this, you have an impulse, you get a correction. This correction was really interesting. Why? Because we had price halting around 5,000, which is a psychological level right here. If price has to move to the upside, where is price most likely going to gravitate to? I'm looking at this piece right here, 6,000, the psychological level. We might be taking out this highs to see prices moving to the upside. So the bigger picture thing on this pair. So let's put this. So you have 4,000, 5,000. Put one more psychological level to the upside. Put 7,000 on this. Makes it completely easy. So big picture thing on this pair. Impulse. You get a correction. Where is price most likely going to gravitate to? You're looking at this 6,000. You're taking out these highs, and if this happens, maybe you get a correction thing. You're expecting prices to move all the way to 7,000. That's the big picture thing for me on the S&P 500. I'm expecting these buyers to take prices again above 6,000, and the next level we're looking at is 7,000. All right, cool. Now you have this in mind. You have an understanding like price has to move to the upside. That's just one thing. So if price has to continue moving to the downside, because there's always two sides to the coin, you're looking at this impulse correction, and maybe it drop again to the downside to an area like this, and it keeps moving to the downside. So these are all possibilities, and I'm not ruling this out. But the reason I'm looking for these buys right now is just because of what's happening again. Big picture, impulse correction, expecting prices to the upside, taking out this. Psychological level 6,000, expecting prices to get again to 7,000. So because of this, now I can step down to a lower time frame. So on the hourly time frame, step down to the hourly time frame real quick to see if there's any possibility, if there's something we can trade this week. So this is it right here. So it makes it completely easy. Now I see this channel thing right here, impulse correction. It comes in really deep. You're looking for the pivot point right here. So you're looking for the pivot point that gets set right here, and you're expecting prices to move again to the upside. It gives you another impulse right there. You get another impulse. You wait for the correction to come in so you can take prices again to the upside. So this right here is a channel thing. So if you're waiting for the correction to come in, you're waiting for prices to move down, then you take prices to the upside. So this is what I'm looking at on the S&P 500. If I see something like this, yeah, I think I'll probably take this one. So right here, so looking at this, so again, it's just an anticipated move thing. I'm not saying this. So we're looking at the psychological level right there of about 6,000. So yep, you might get a good trade off of this. So you're looking at 6,000 psychological level. So sometimes I use the psychological levels as projected profit target, or just the target thing, or the take profit thing. So that's how I use psychological level sometimes. So you're looking at this piece right here. That's the move thing I'm looking at on the S&P 500. So again, I'm not really going to waste time on the S&P 500 because this move right here is similar to what's happening on NAS100, similar to what's happening on US30. So if you understand the move on NAS100, you can use this and trade the S&P 500, and for some reason it coincides to what's happening on US30. It's like a mirror image thing. So if you look at this piece right here to this piece right here, so if you take this out like this, you know what, keep this, let's copy and paste. So if you take this piece out like this, and I'll just cut this, copy this, sorry, come to NAS100, paste it. Let's see, can I paste? So if you paste this on NAS100, so you're looking at a similar move thing on NAS100. You paste this on the S&P 500. It's a similar move on the S&P 500 as well. So I'm gonna make this darker just a little bit so you see what I'm saying. So take this. So that's a move thing right there. If you put this as well, so it just makes it like really easy. It's a similar move. Like when the pairs start correlating, this is what I like looking at. I like looking at the pairs when it's really correlating like this. So let's click this out. So look at this piece right here. So that's it. So you're looking at this piece on US30, same thing. On NAS100, you're looking at the same thing on the S&P 500. So I'll use this correlation and see if I can get those buys again to the upside, and just a little bit. So that's what I'm looking at on all these pairs: US30, NAS100, and the S&P 500. And let's look at the last one, that has to be gold. Alright guys, so here's gold on the weekly time frame. Very interesting. We had this impulsive buys that came in last week. So now what's the structure thing? You have an impulse, you get a correction, impulse, you get a correction, impulse, you get a correction, impulse, you're waiting for a correction so you can take prices again to the upside. Now looking at this, where is price most likely going to gravitate to? It's going to gravitate from, let's say, 3,000 all the way to 4,000. So you're looking at this piece right here. You had an impulse thing, you had a test, so price should then start moving to the upside. But when you look at the structure, the way price is moving is an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse. So you're waiting for the correction. So there's still a possibility for sellers to come in. So you look at this on the daily time frame, and here's the reason why I didn't take this trade last week. You had an impulse, or this week, sorry. You had a correction, you had an impulse, you had a correction. The correction was very impulsive for me to take the setup, and I didn't really see like the entry, the confirmation, and the setup to take this. So I just sat on my hands and watched price just move to the upside. Now if you try to buy from an area like this, I don't think it's the best. So you just have to wait, let's say, for a pullback to come in so you can take prices again to the upside. So now is there a trend line you can look at? So I'm going to pay attention to this trend line on the daily time frame. So you're looking at impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse, and I'm waiting for a correction. So this is a trend line I'm paying attention to. Let's make sure I can see this on lower time frames. Let's say the 4 hours. So right there. So I'll step down to like the 8-hour time frame really quick. And again, the structure is really impressive. Like this is really good. So you look at this on the 8-hour time frame, same thing. Impulse, correction, impulse, correction, then another impulse thing. Now if you was trading supply and demand, this will have been a very good trade for you, because you're looking at this piece right here and price came back to an area like this. So again, supply and demand, you might be looking at this piece right here and you're waiting for prices to pull back to an area like this so you can do the buys. Now I don't trade supply and demand, so I look at prices a little bit different. I use psychological levels on the trend lines, and I just wait for my price thing. Now this will have been a very beautiful trade, but again, I didn't take this trade right here, so it was really difficult for me just looking at these sales. I wanted the sales to come in a very corrective manner, slow down, and then you get the turn, and I didn't see it. So let's look at this. So if I'm to take positions on this pair, because we had an impulse thing, we had a correction, you had an impulse, you had a correction, there's an impulse. If we get a correction back to an area like this, then I'll look for this buys again to the upside. So looking at the DXY, if the DXY starts moving to the upside, and that's why I said it might be a little bit risky if you're trying to take buys on, gold right now, because every time you have an impulse, you get a correction, you get an impulse, you get a correction. So there's a possibility you get an impulse, there's a possibility you see price pulling back to the downside. So you can step down, let's say, to the 4-hour time frame and most likely the hourly time frame. But personally, I'll wait for this to come in and I'll look for buying opportunities again to the upside. Can you look for selling opportunities? Yes, you can look for selling opportunities on this pair if you have a setup to trade the reversal. But personally, I would say I also have a setup I can look at for the reversal, but I don't use it as much as if I was doing the continuation. So this is a reversal trade right here, but this right here to the upside is a continuation. So I like the continuations better because you're looking at an impulsive run, you're looking at a pullback, you're looking at an impulsive move to the upside, so it gives you more and you can hold it better compared to like the reversals. Reversals are always a little bit difficult. So I'll look at this again, but that's the analysis thing. That's what I'm expecting on gold, and it's just looking for these sells to the downside. You wait for these temporal sells to come in, then you see prices moving to the upside. So that's what I'm going to pay attention to. Let's look at the hourly time frame real quick. Yeah, it's not a lot you can look at. If you're trading on lower time frames, it makes it completely easy, but you need to be careful. You're getting impulse, you're getting the impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction on everything, but at some point this is going to stop moving to the upside and you see price pulling back, so we can take prices then to the upside again for the bigger move. So that's my analysis right there on gold. And this week I'm going to pay attention again to US30, because this one's look better to me compared to the gold one. Pay attention to NAS and the S&P 500. So these two pairs is what's really on my radar thing, and I'll pay attention to this compared to the gold one. So for gold, I really need to see the pullback coming in. So stay back on the 8-hour time frame. I want to see this pullback coming in like really good, then I can attempt the buys. But with US30, NAS100 and the S&P 500, this right here, I think it looks more feasible to me compared to the gold one. And if we have a pullback on this pair, I know what I'm looking at, I know the entry, the setup I'm looking at and I'm expecting, so I can take the buys again to the upside. All right guys, so that's it for me for this week, and let's see, I hope I get some trading opportunities for next week. All right guys, be patient with everything you do and stay consistent, and I'll see you during the next one. Bye for now.